The best a man can get. Hi, I'm Scott Ott, and this is Bill Whittle Now. Bill, Gillette has a new commercial out, and frankly, not just a commercial, but a campaign and a way of life to deal with the crisis of toxic masculinity, to address the hashtag Me Too movement, the wave of sexual harassment, and just the general climate of bullying in our culture. They've actually produced this new ad that starts off with kind of a montage of news announcers saying those terms that I just listed, and then showing men standing in the mirror, looking at themselves in the mirror. And Gillette is, in essence, committing itself to, I want to read it correctly because I don't want to misquote them. We pledge to actively challenge the stereotypes and expectations of what it means to be a man. And their initiative is designed to promote positive, attainable, inclusive, and healthy versions of what it means to be a man. And frankly, Bill, if you watch the ad, you would probably be repulsed at some of the scenes where they show men diminishing women and, patting them on the bottom and, just kind of talking to stuff that you would not do in a workplace and little kids being beaten up and stuff like that. So the question is, I guess if you're going to address toxic masculinity, Bill, wouldn't you as a conservative prefer that it be done by private organizations like Gillette rather than by the heavy hand of government?
Well, first of all, I would like to say that having used Gillette products for many years, it's been nice knowing you. And whoever convinced you about this idea has simply added you to the roster of other companies that have gone down this road and immediately gone bankrupt. It couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of guys. So thanks, for all the shaves. Scott, the problem with this country is the over-feminization of the country, which is accomplished by extremely enthusiastic feminists, but aided and abetted by, I don't know, is there like a lambda male, or is there, is there omega males, I guess. We have reached a point now where the culture that the left is trying to get us to swallow is so shrill and so hysterical that companies are simply going along, I suppose, because as members of this generation that was raised on this political correctness get older, they start taking jobs as guys who are doing ad campaigns for razor companies. I can remember what was, I think many people have said, was without question the greatest rebranding effort of the last 50 years. And that was another shave-related product, which was Old Spice. Old Spice was what my dad used. I remember, I'll never forget that bottle. I'll never forget that tiny little plastic kind of cork thing. I'll never forget the smell of Old Spice. That's what my dad wore when I was growing up. But as Old Spice became Old Spice, and then it became Older Spice, and then it became really old, boring Spice, they just basically weren't selling anything. And when they decided to relaunch Old Spice, they didn't go with this is the new, softer Old Spice. They went as hyper-masculine as they could with these absolutely terrific ads where this guy just bursts through, bathroom walls and stuff. And they made Old Spice cool again. Yeah, on a horse. I'm on a horse, which is turned to diamonds. It's brilliant. And it was brilliant because what they were actually emphasizing was they were emphasizing this traditional idea of masculinity in a world that's becoming ever more feminized. And it absolutely revolutionized that brand.
Now,
so
Bill,
this is
Gillette
just another
is
example of yes?
I was just going to say, Gillette is not saying that a man shouldn't be a man. What they want to do is
Yes,
promote positive images of men. And let me tell you what they're doing. In addition to the ad campaign and in being able to make sure that their future ads and in everything they do presents a positive vision of manhood, what they're doing is giving away $3 million, $1 million a year for the next 3 years. And they're starting off with the Boys and Girls Clubs, giving them money to help fund programs that provide positive masculine examples who do not sexually harass people at work, do not beat people up, and or do not sexually assault people.
There's just so much to say here. I'm utterly convinced that if you were to take a large sample population, 100,000 people or something, 100,000 self-identified conservatives and 100,000 self-identified progressives, you would find that the self-identified conservatives had far happier homes and far, far fewer neuroses about their parents than the progressives did. I don't know whether Gillette actually used the term toxic masculinity, but certainly the tone of what they made with that statement is an indication that they have bought this line that the left, and especially the radical feminist left, has been selling, which is to say, when they say toxic masculinity, they are adding an adjective which in their mind doesn't need to be there. There's no such thing as toxic masculinity. There's only masculinity, and masculinity to the left means bullying and patting women on the butt and date rape and all the rest.
So has Gillette been hoodwinked or extorted?
Hold on. That's what masculinity is to these damaged, neurotic, very unhappy people who make up the progressive left and who are setting the tone for the culture. That's when the definition of masculinity becomes boorishness and pushing into rape or assault. That's what they consider masculinity to be, because they've never had a positive masculine example in their lives ever. I'm sorry to cut you off, but that just needed to be said.
No, that's okay, because it made me wonder, do you think the executives at Gillette have essentially been, for want of a better term, extorted or blackmailed or just hoodwinked into thinking, it seems like the problem here is not that we're not failing to acknowledge that there are men who sexually harass people and who do that at work, and there are bullies, and there are people for whom a Me Too movement certainly should have sprung up because of their behavior. We're not denying that such men exist, but the effect of the commercial seems to be to paint that over all men and not necessarily say,
Precisely
Bill,
right.
Every man is responsible for doing this personally, but every man is responsible because it happens among men.
Every man is responsible because it happens among men, and therefore we will present what we are calling alternative forms of masculinity that do not allow for things like violence and rape. And that leaves you in a position where you start having to find yourself almost arguing in favor of violence and rape, and that's the trap that they set for us. So it's a false comparison. It's a false dichotomy. Traditional masculinity, as it's understood to be by conservatives, real men, let's just get down to brass tacks. Real men don't rape women. Real men go out and punish the men that rape women. Real men don't assault women because real men don't need to assault women. Real men are built out of the kind of thing that actual women are attracted to.
And they show examples of this, by the way, in the commercial. There are men stepping in to stop bullying. There are men stepping in to stop sexual harassment.
Well, having dealt with bullies in my day, my understanding is that if the kind of stepping in that's done in order to prevent bullying consists of a very sensitive and thoughtfully worded letter to the bully's parents explaining that you are fully aware, as my son, that that economic hardships can cause all kinds of family dysfunction. This kind of, you're just gonna breed a much more resistant brand of bullies. The entire premise of bullyism. Since bullyism came up and it's tied into this thing, I believe that bullyism, as experienced among humans, is it's kind of an evolutionary appendage. It is what bullies are trying to do is they're trying to find weakness and punish weakness and eliminate weakness, and this is a function that's built into most animals and mammals especially. It's good for the species to grind out the weak. That's good for the societal species in an evolutionary context for the weak to be winnowed out and basically removed from the gene pool. And needless to say, as a person who believes in civilization, I find this to be exactly the opposite case. The definition of civilization to me is taking care of the weak and the old and the sick, and taking care of them by the strong and the healthy who are prepared to do violence on their behalf if that's what becomes necessary to protect them. So what bullies are doing, Scott, is they're not picking on you because they don't like you. They're picking on you because they perceive you to be weak, And that's why every single father has told every single son who ever had a father and a son who the subject ever came up, anybody who ever successfully dealt with bullies has had the same advice all the time, and that is, if this guy pushes you, you have to push him back, and if he hits you or threatens you, just hit him in the face as hard as you can. And the reason that is such superb advice is because it instantly disarms the bully by saying, I'm not weak, I am willing to defend myself, and the bully is immediately just deactivated and goes looking for somebody else weak to pick on. Now, that's a bit of a divergence, but basically what the Gillette statement is saying is that the solution to violent and assaulting men, that the solution to predatory men is to create men who are so gentle that they're not capable of these kind of actions. But this is a serious mistake, because the only way you stop predatory males from committing violence upon the weak is by having good males who are willing to commit violence upon the predators. And you may argue that to the grave, but there's no question that this is true. And now we get down to the actual motivation of it. It is in the interest of beta males to basically promote a theory that anything that's considered masculine by traditional standards is toxic, because they are not capable of producing those kind of behaviors. When the beta males, when essentially the cowards and the weaklings are when we live in a world where physical courage, strength, toughness, and all of this has no relevance to our lives because the wolves are so far away from the door, then you can have the rise of cowardly, neurotic, weak people telling the rest of us that being cowardly, neurotic, and weak is in fact a desirable goal, and that anybody who exhibits any kind of strength or toughness or courage or initiative is defective somehow. And you don't have those kind of pathologies among growing and healthy societies, because among growing and healthy societies, you are dealing with the reality of the world, and it is right there. It's not an abstract. It's not a Psychology Today paper. There are the people coming down from the mountains on horses who are going to burn this village. They're going to rape the women. They're going to steal the children for slaves, and they're going to kill all the men. And we either stop them or we don't. And this is the kind of reality that produces traditional masculinity. It's true that the men coming down doing the raping and murdering are men, but it's also true that the guys who are grabbing their pitchforks and their hammers and stuff and going up to defend them are men too. And that's the only thing that will stop them.
A final question, and we need to keep the answer to this brief because both you and I have to go moisturize after this episode. What strikes me about this commercial is that, and this is the thing I think that your particular view of this it will be most salient. What strikes me about this is that Gillette didn't just make a commercial in which men are portrayed as the kind of people they believe men should be. They've changed their slogan from the best a man can get to the best a man can be, or at least they're using that for their campaign. They didn't just do it, they announced it. They said, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to give $3 million, and we want you to join us in this journey. What do you make of that?
This, to me, is the same kind of insanity that gripped ESPN and the NFL, for example, where the top people in charge of these kind of things decided that they would rather, dealing with a Colin Kaepernick case as an example, decided that the NFL will appeal to the sensibilities of Berkeley professors at the expense of regular hardworking Americans who would like to just have a Sunday where they don't have to be beaten up by left-wing politics all the time. In other words, a group of intellectual elitists with enormous neurotic complexes as a general rule, because I work among these people and I see them every day. There's a lot more neurotic actors than there are farmers, and if you don't believe that, spend some time with both of them and you'll learn very quickly. So what's happening is, Scott, is that they have managed to convince the top level company executives that this is the future, that anything that we don't do that goes along this progressive path is not only going to doom us to irrelevancy, but is going to bring the forces of the social justice warriors down on our heads. And therefore, we're gonna make the NFL into a I Hate America club for the Berkeley professors that don't watch football. And the same thing is true for what they did with Battlefield 5, which is a video game about World War II. The Battlefield 1 game, which was about World War I, did great, $4 billion, something like that. When they made World War II game, the progressives in charge of the studio said, how do I explain to my daughter that there's no one for her to play in this World War II game about, the American troops moving through Germany in World War II. So they've introduced a number of female characters, and when you're going through the battles in World War II, you can hear female soldiers calling and screaming and so on and talking. And the players who play this in order to have the experience of World War II said, well, we don't like this. And the people who ran the game studio said, that's because you're uneducated bigots. That's because you're just a bunch of stupid, anti-woman, childish, toxic men. To which they would respond, we don't have any problems with other games with women in them, and Lara Croft or whatever the case may be. We love playing women characters in games that are not historical. It's about historical accuracy. Not about historical accuracy, it's about your bigotry, and if you don't like the game, then don't buy it. So they didn't buy it, and the game is doing a quarter of what its predecessor did, and hopefully some people will be fired. But basically, Scotty, what's happening is this: a small group of people, exceedingly vocal people who can rally an awful lot of angry tweets, are trying to convince every single company in America that their neurotic, degraded view of masculinity, which is based on the fact that they've never had any masculine role models, and they simply, in the case of the men, lack the courage and the strength to do what needs to be done with courage and strength when the time comes. They've all convinced them that the future is this kale-eating, wheatgrass drinking, steel-cut oatmeal kind of a future, and that you got to get on board the bandwagon. But that's not what the evidence shows. The evidence shows get woke, go broke. And as Steve Green's friend says, Sarah, I've forgotten her last name.
Hoyt.
Yes, thank you. Sarah Hoyt said basically, here's the pattern: roll left and die. Before you put the company out of business, go as far left as you can, and that will be the end of the company, and this will be the end of Gillette. I guarantee you.
Well, while some people watching this may be wondering why somebody would get all in a lather about a television commercial, you might think about the fact that more people will see that Gillette commercial more often than any individual news story or story about some politician or policy in Washington, D.C.
And it's social engineering. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but it is a small group of people who have determined that you will accept their philosophy, whether you think it makes any sense or not. And if that means sex education classes for kindergartners and having 3-year-olds or 2-year-olds talk about their gender preferences, if that's what it takes for you to get in line with their philosophy, then they're going to shove it down your throats. And I think that people have had enough of it. I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
Bill Whittle's analysis of this rising and rolling tide of cultural change happens 5 days a week here at BillWhittle.com. It's made possible by those members who have gone to BillWhittle.com and clicked that Become a Member link. Many folks are watching us on YouTube. You know, you may not have noticed this on the YouTube page. There is a little bell, which Bill refers to as the Liberty Bell, that you can click, and that will give you a notification to let you know when the next video comes out. Make sure that you know where that is and that you've activated that, and let your friends know about it as well. We appreciate the members at BillWhittle.com who have made this program possible. So for Bill Whittle, I'm Scott Ott. Thanks for watching.